The Secretary of State for the Colonies or Colonial Secretary was the British cabinet minister in charge of managing the United Kingdom's various colonial dependencies. The position was first created in 1768 to deal with the increasingly troublesome North American colonies. Previously, those responsibilities had fallen to the Secretary of State for the Southern Department, who was responsible for southern England, Wales, Ireland, the American colonies, and relations with the Catholic and Muslim states of Europe. In 1782, following the loss of the American colonies, the office was abolished, and its duties given to the Home Secretary, then Lord Sydney. In 1794 a new office was created for Henry Dundas, the Secretary of State for War, which now took responsibility for the colonies, and was renamed the Secretary of State for War and the Colonies in 1801. In 1854, military reforms led to the colonial and military responsibilities of the Secretary of State being split into two separate offices, with Sir George Grey becoming the first Secretary of State for the colonies under the new arrangement. In the latter part of the 19th century, the United Kingdom also gained control over a number of territories with the status of protectorate. The ministerial responsibility for these territories was initially held by the Foreign Secretary. However, by the early years of the 20th century the responsibility for each of these territories had been transferred to the Colonial Secretary as well. The League of Nations mandated territories acquired as a result of the Treaty of Versailles became a further responsibility of the Colonial Office. In the aftermath of the First World War, in 1925 part of the Colonial Office was separated out as the Dominions Office, with its own Secretary of State. The new office was responsible for dealing with the Dominions together with a small number of other territories. In the 20 years following the end of the Second World War, much of the British Empire was dismantled as its various territories gained independence. In consequence, the Colonial Office was merged in 1966 with the Commonwealth Relations Office to form the Commonwealth Office, while ministerial responsibility was transferred to the Secretary of State for Commonwealth Affairs. In 1968 the Commonwealth Office was subsumed into the Foreign Office, which was renamed the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. The Colonial Secretary never had responsibility for the provinces and princely states of India, which had its own Secretary of State. From 1768 until 1966 the Secretary of State was supported by an Under-Secretary of State for the Colonies, and latterly by a Minister of State. Secretaries of State for the Colonies, 1768 to 1782. Responsibility for the colonies held by Home Secretary 1782 to 1794. Secretary of State for War 1794 to 1801. Secretary of State for War and the Colonies 1801 to 1854. Secretaries of State for the Colonies 1854 to 1903. Secretaries of State for the Colonies 1903 to 1966. Responsibility for the colonies held by Secretary of State for Commonwealth Affairs 1966 to 1968. Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs 1968 present. Following the British Nationality Act 1981, the term colony ceased to be used. Britain's rule over Hong Kong, the last significant colony, ceased in 1997. Britain retains certain overseas territories,